You know, making movies is hard.
Making movies is hard.
Welcome to Making Movies is Hard, the podcast about the struggle of being an independent filmmaker. I'm Mark Bassell, the founding host of the podcast. I am a sci-fi horror filmmaker, and my first feature film, The Alternate, is playing the festival circuit right now.
I'm Liz Manischel. I'm a writer, director, producer who has made 2 features and is currently in development on about 5 more. I'm a distribution consultant who used to manage the creative distribution initiative at Sundance.
This week, we welcome directing duo Nick Scown and Julia Seabaugh on the show to talk about their new documentary, Too Soon, Comedy After 9/11, which is streaming now on the Vice YouTube channel. Nick and Julie talk about how they met at a wedding and became co-directors from that meeting, which I think is very interesting, and then how they went about filming the interviews for the film, and then how they tackled a licensing issue they faced in making a documentary of this scale with all like the different footage they wanted to introduce into the film. We also have a brand new listener question to answer and a news story to discuss, which we haven't done in, I don't know, like 100 episodes. So we're going to go right into the interview. But first, Liz, what's going on with you?
Oh, I'm in hell. I decided to make this short film, and the whole point, like, I came out of this incubator to redesign the industry, to make filmmaking more fun, and I was like, I'm going to do it different this time. I'm going to have lots of all crew meetings, and we're all going to get to know each other, and we're all going to be really sensible about the way we work, and we're going to make decisions that make it easier for everyone. And you can't do that with a short film. Like, I'm learning the hard way that, like, you could try your best to set up an environment where you make the filmmaking as sane as possible and the hours and the demand not so harsh, but a feature film is always going to snatch up your favorite crew person and take them away because they offer more stability and more constant work and more profile. So I am just hiring and rehiring people over and over again on this short. I'm in hell.
That's funny. Yeah, I can imagine that being tricky because a lot of the shorts that I've worked on before, it's like I hire a DP and like maybe a couple other like key crew people, and then like we just figure out everybody else like, you know, a week before we shoot. You know, it's like who's available.
Smart.
You know,
I should just do that, but I'm being very specific about who I hire. And I really want to be picky about it.
I feel like it's a really ideal way to work. You know, and I know you'll make it work, and I know you'll make it happen. But yeah, I can imagine that being challenging. You know?
It's just foolish because, I mean, first of all, it's a horror comedy, and we're shooting 2 weeks before Halloween. So like everyone in the LA area is doing like Halloween horror nights, or they're doing like these activations that are Halloween related. And then because of Delta and because of IATSE and because of all of these things that are coming to a head, I think there's a massive influx of productions right now. And so they're stealing all my crew. It's just bad timing. And then my lead actress, who's amazing, who's like the best human in the world, and I won't say who this is because I don't know how many people know about this, but she'll be 8 months pregnant when we shoot. So I can't push it any longer. So we are up against it. We're shooting, and we're just going to make it work. But thank you for your faith. I just want to recognize that, like, the logistics are never ideal. And how are you? You're not in hell. What are you doing?
No, I'm not in hell. I'm working on a job right now with my day job. It's a challenging corporate video, I guess is the best way to put it. But it's like got 90 to 100 visual effects shots and a very demanding director and a very demanding client, and I've been working like really long hours and everything. And then my sister-in-law was in town with her little baby who's 7 months old, and so there was 2 babies in the house for like 3 days, and so like double babies is like it's a lot to manage. So I was definitely helping a lot with that as much as I could too. And then luckily they were here over the weekend mostly, so I didn't have to work too much on the weekend. But anyways, so that's what's going on. And then dude, I found out last night at midnight that I left a PA off the credits for The Alternate, and he had sent the movie like on a film festival on an online thing to all his family, and he's so excited to share his work, and then that's his name was not on there. And so now I'm like redoing the DCP and paying like, you know, whatever money it takes to redo it to
That's
get
like
his
a
name on
thousand
there.
dollars. That's really like a lot of money that you're spending.
I found a cheaper. Well, I started already like commissioned 2 extra DCPs for other film festivals, and this person
Okay.
is like kind of doing a joint deal, and so he had just finished them this morning, and I was like, "You got to redo them," and then he's like, "So he's giving me a deal," but still, it's not thousands of dollars, but it's like
It's a
it's a
lot.
lot. It's a lot
That's
of money
very nice
for.
of you. I think I would have just
But
like
it's
sent them
like
cookies and said I'm sorry.
I don't know. It just feels like if this is gonna be like, what if we get into a San Francisco film festival in a few months that like, needs a DCP? Like, what am I gonna do? Redo it again? So like, I don't know. No, I mean, I just feel like it's the right move to do. Yes, it sucks. It's money, but whatever. I'm just gonna do it.
It's very nice.
Maybe the good karma will come back to me one day. Um, but yeah, I also wanted to make sure people knew that we have a Patreon page for the podcast. So go over to www.patreon.com/mmih podcast. You can give $1, you can give $2, you can give $5 or even $9, which will get you a brand new fancy, Making Movies is Hard pin that Liz will send to you from her house to your house, wherever you live. And yeah, it's like kind of what supports the show besides, our pocketbooks. So if you like the show and you see,
I want to jump in here with a little bit more conviction.
Okay, what are you gonna say?
I want to say, we have a brand new producer. His name is Eric Toms, and he's kicking our asses into gear. And you may notice a new format. You may notice us trying to be a little bit more strategic in the way we put together the show, and it's all inspired by this extra crew person, but he means business, and we need to start paying him. We have to start paying Alrik back for his investment into this podcast, and we just want to make the show as good as possible for everyone. So I just want to say, like, this isn't just like if you can, like, if you have the means, please support the show. It would mean everything to us.
And then we can do more fun things later and like expand. So yeah. That would be great.
Thank you.
Anyways, yes, and thank you to everyone who is supporting us on Patreon now. We love it. But I think we've talked too much. Without any more delay, here's our chat with Nick and Julie about Too Soon, comedy after 9/11.
Would one of you give us the elevator pitch for Too Soon?
Sure. Yeah. Too Soon is Too Soon Comedy After 9/11 is a documentary that follows the kind of stop and then rise of comedy after the attacks on September 11th, tracking how comedians and entertainers try and find a way to discuss what happened and kind of heal from the tragedy.
And how many days did you shoot the film?
Well, it was a 4.5-year shoot.
Over how many days?
Yeah, maybe like 50 days, like, because I think we have around 50 interviews that we shot. So and it was usually maybe it was like 35 days, because there was a couple days that we did multiple interviews, but usually it was just 1 or 2 per shoot day.
Well, we did like 2 trips to New York that were about a week each, and a dozen and a half people, and then trip to Montreal, we had 5, and then we shot around LA on off days during like Nick's lunch breaks. And yeah, that's a good question. We would have to do some schedule digging to really get a final tally on that, but that's the thing with doing it with just 2 people for 4 years and calling in favors and borrowing all the equipment. We just like shot when we could, basically.
My favorite question: what's the budget?
That is a good question. I'd say when it was just Julie and I, the budget was a used car, maybe a used Prius with like that budget, and then to finish it with Vice is like a 1-bedroom condo in Los Angeles, probably. was like
that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we were able to get a lot of it done by ourselves, but in the end, we do need you, especially for our project, which uses so many clips from other things. We needed to be able to license footage or to pay for a fair use lawyer to explain why we weren't going to pay for this, or like how we could legally do it. So those became the biggest price points, which Julie and I from the beginning kind of knew, like, oh, we can get this in the can for not a lot of money, but to finish it, we will need some more money because there's just too many clips to put in the film. So,
and then, like, why, like, how'd you come up with the idea? Like, why this story, of all stories for you guys to tell?
Well, I had uh, uh, been looking at film schools in New York, and I happened to have scheduled a trip, months in advance that ended up being 2 weeks after the attack. And so I was in New York visiting friends, didn't end up going to see any of the schools, just kind of hanging out with my friends, trying to help them with what they were, the PTSD that they were all kind of dealing with. And had to actually walk through the ground zero area because the subways were stopped. So I had to like take my luggage and walk from one train stop to the other. And just that obviously stuck with me. And when I got home from that trip, there was the Onion 9/11 issue kind of waiting for me. And I laughed I was like, oh, I'm like laughing for the first time in weeks. And it was just a very cathartic moment. And so when I started pitching Julie the idea, she had the same thing of oh, I had that 9/11 issue.
I'm writing. If you see me writing, I'm writing down questions to ask you in a few minutes. You answered this already, but maybe there's more color. How long did y'all spend working on the film from that moment to release? I mean, I could do the math. It's 20 years, but maybe you could bring more information there.
Yeah, I mean, I had this idea for a very long time. I just kind of thought someone else would do it because I'm not a documentary filmmaker. I love comedy, but I don't have a comedy background. But about 5.5 years ago, I think it was the spring of 2016. I had read this book by Tim Ferriss called The 4-Hour Workweek. And I had gotten it actually for like a family member who was struggling, but I was like, oh, I should probably read a little of this to make sure it's not BS before I start potting it off to other people. And so I read it on like a plane trip back home, and it had a thing of like, if there's an idea or a concept or a corporation or whatever that you've had for a long time and that you want to do something with, but you don't know how, are there 5 people you could email today that could help you with it? And I had met Julie at a friend's wedding, and Julie is a comedy journalist who's been doing it for 2 decades. And so I was like, oh, well, I can at least pitch this idea to Julie and she can tell me if there's any traction there. And so that's when kind of Julie and I started working together.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that pitch lunch was in May of 2016. And then we definitely started filming in July at the Just for Laughs Montreal Comedy Festival that year. So yeah, this thing like predates the Trump presidency. It had gone through a couple different subtitles of when we were a bit more maybe optimistic about the role comedy was going to play in healing the nation. And just a few different incarnations, and just kind of all finally came together the 5 years later with a product we're very, very happy and proud of.
Yeah, so it was kind of the pitch, and then almost right away we started researching, finding clips we could use, previous interviews if anyone had done any, so that we knew who we should try to talk to, and sort of kind of building a master list of like, okay, who are the people we want to talk to, and then seeing who on Julie's Rolodex that those matched up so she could do that. And then so Julie was calling in favors to her comic friends, and I was calling in favors to my filmmaker friends of like, can I borrow your camera? Stealing edit time on weekends or on nights just to whenever we could, so that we could start cutting like trailers and proof of concepts, just so that we could show the people we wanted to interview, this is what the film is going to be like. Because you go to anyone kind of like you were saying, like, and you're like, oh, it's a 9/11, it's a comedy documentary, and people are like, this seems very dangerous, like this seems like an easy, a bad thing that I could fall into. So we had to be like, no, watch this, here's what it's about, here's what it's going to be like. And as we interviewed more people, then they could see, oh, my friend's in it, like Todd Barry is in it, or Gilbert Godfrey is in it. And once they see those other people are in it, then they feel more comfortable and understand, oh, this is not going to be some kind of hit piece or anything like that. Like, we are treating all our interview subjects with respect, and we're treating the tragedy with respect. It's not just a series of 9/11 jokes, which is kind of like the last thing we wanted people to think.
Yeah, I would say from the comedian's perspective, like, they did get it, but also, like Nick said, there was just kind of like, ooh, that's a great idea. Oh, I don't know. Like, if the idea that people outside of the comedy world would really understand the concept of it. But we also wanted to kind of narrow the field down, because, we could be talking to comedians still at this point. It could have been a 10-year project. It could have been a 15-year project. So we wanted to narrow it down a little bit to either people within the comedy industry that were personally or professionally affected by the events of 9/11, or that they had specifically 9/11 material. So it could all be kind of strung together chronologically from firsthand experience, as opposed to just, talking heads, wafting poetically. It was all very much like people who had very visceral memories of everything that happened, short term and long term, and what the effects were continuing even today.
And then this is a question for both of you to answer. Compared to all the other projects you've made, how difficult was this one?
Well, this is Julie's first project, so
first film. Yeah, I've done journalism for 19 years now. Written for the New York Times and Rolling Stone and Variety and all that. Documentary is something I always kind of envisioned down the road, especially in recent years, as journalism isn't quite the field that it used to be in terms of relevance and truth telling and financially and all those things. That's a whole different other podcast altogether I can talk about. But I also, have released a book, and I have another book in the works. And, when Nick approached about this idea, it was like, oh yes, this is definitely the next stage of a comedy career evolution for me. It's just a way of still telling big, important stories of things that comedy fans should know about, just in a different, exciting format.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I've worked on a lot of other projects in my film and TV career, a lot as an editor, and then as a director. It's funny. It seems like I tend to either make things that are very simple and easy to pull off. Like most of my short films, even the ones that have done well on the festival circuit, I've usually designed to be shot in one day, just because I found it's easier to get quality talent and good actors. If you're just like, it's just going to be one day, an 8-hour, 10-hour shoot, it's not going to be crazy, and you can get like good talent to agree to do like one day on a weekend when they're working on a show where maybe their character doesn't get to do fun stuff and you're giving them something else to do. So like, I would usually design my short films to be simple, but with this project, or like my first narrative feature film, they're just trying to make anything feature length is just, it takes time. Like, the first one, like I was talking about how long it took to make this one, and someone who knows me was like, well, how long did it take you to make the first feature? I was like, well, that was like 5 years of writing, and then a couple years of, like financing and shooting and editing, and then film festivals, and then trying to get a distributor. And so it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, it all takes time. This was more challenging than I'd say a feature film, because a lot of times you're just waiting in other places where it was like, I was just waiting to hear on the money, or waiting to hear on film festivals. But on this one, it was just, we always had something to work on. There was never a downtime, essentially. It was always, we can be editing, we can be researching, we can be archiving clips. So that was kind of the difference between maybe like a narrative project and a documentary.
And I said it the other night after the screening, like, it's really hit me, the realization that it was kind of a good thing that it took us 5 years, most of it just the two of us, because it's a lot better than I think it would have been if it was just a year or something like that, because we really had the time to figure out, what are the story beats we want to hit and how do we want to say things. And most of it was, our voices without a lot of outside control. But thankfully Vice saw the vision at the end after we had put all the hard work into it. So yeah, I'm kind of down with this whole 5-year thing from here on out.
I mean, it was good to experiment because we could try stuff and fail and no one would see it but us. Whereas when you're handing in a cut to the network, you really want to make sure that it is what you want it to be, because they might fall in love with something that you are not happy with. And you're like, oh, why did we show them that? Because now they like it and we're stuck with it.
Yeah. Wait, did we fail at any part? I don't think there was anything terrible.
No.
But
no.
Yeah,
But there was potential if we had been working with collaborators from the start of if I don't know, especially I was a good student in college, so I was, you want to get the A from the teacher, so you can sometimes try to please the other people and give them what they want versus what you think you want or the film needs. And because Julie and I had been discussing for 4 years what this should be, we were very clear in what our vision was. If we would tell once we had an archivist, we were like, these are the kind of clips we want, very specific. We're not like, oh, just grab everything. We're like, no, we need this from this person around this time. Good luck, because Julie and I tried to find it and we couldn't, so good luck to you.
I'm dying to ask 30 questions, but the one that's biting at me the most is I work in artist support, and if I were talking to two filmmakers who built an entire documentary off of archival and licensed material that they didn't have the rights to, I would give them such a talking to, because I would just be like, what do you think? Someone's just going to come in and rescue you and pay for all of this footage and then release you onto a massive platform? And that happened to you. So I'm just like, how did you get to Vice? And what was the backup plan?
What we did, as we were working, we became very conscious. We always had, okay, what is the worst case scenario plan? And so this movie was going to come out on the 20th anniversary, whether Vice was involved or not. And that was kind of our pitch when we did pitch to networks. It's we are doing this. It is coming out. You can either be a part of it or not, which I think was a stronger pitch position than other projects would have. And we were very conscious of making any essential clip that we were using be something that you could argue is fair use. So we would always have either the person themselves talking about the clip, so either David Cross setting up a David Cross bit, or one of the other comics saying, oh, I love this Patrice O'Neill bit, and then also explaining why it works, so that there is always a fair use argument of we're not just showing a clip to show a clip. We are so we were very conscious of that. And so we knew there could be a version, not the best version. If we couldn't license anything, there would have been challenges, because you can't do B-roll and things like that. You can't get away with fair use. So it would have been challenging, but I mean, we would have found a way to do it with still photos or whatever was necessary. And it would have been hard to make trailers, because once you're doing promotional things, you can't use fair use in promotional items. So we had to be very conscious at the end of okay, what clips do we could fair use this clip, but is this clip worth paying the licensing for so we can use it in promotion? So we were always had a fail safe for that. But then we knew we would have to raise the, even if it was just us, we knew we were going to have to do a Kickstarter or something to raise the money to hire a fair use lawyer, because we didn't want to just count on, oh, we've been smart about it. So we did that. And so that was kind of the fail safe, was to be very conscious of what it means to use a clip, and making sure it was as button tight as possible. Yeah, sorry, I forgot about the second part of the question of
I think you answered the backup plan, because you always had the backup plan of the version of the film that you could still make.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, in a writing equivalent, it'd be oh, I'm doing an adaptation of this book that I don't have the rights to it. It's oh yeah, don't do that. But it's oh, but if you're doing an adaptation of a book that's in the public domain, oh yeah, go ahead. So that was, we were trying to make sure that we were clear on what we were doing, and not just going to have a film that we couldn't show, or that if we put up on Vimeo would get taken down because we were in breach of content or whatever.
And in addition to a lot of the comedy clips being fair use, just, the 9/11 Memorial Museum in New York and the National Comedy Center upstate New York were also really, really good about, kind of grasping the vision and helping us out with a lot of filling in some of those gaps too, for all the different, what do you call not displays, but
the B-roll, the archival, the
whatever. When you go into a museum and it's like we have this
the kiosk. Is that not the word? Okay.
When you go to a museum and it's like when you go, and it's like we have the pyramid display that's running for
exhibits.
Yes. All right. It's early in LA. Early morning. Exhibits. I'm a journalist.
So I just wanted to kind of break down your process. So did you make the whole movie before you went to pitch to networks? And then kind of just like Liz said, you just took the risk, you made the movie you wanted to make, and then you're like, okay, now we need someone to foot the bill, and then just started to go out and pitch people. And then second part of that question, how did you get to the ability to pitch at these places like Vice, etc.?
Yeah. So what we did is we got essentially, we had used up kind of Julie's Rolodex and my very limited Rolodex of people that we could interview. And we kind of for ourselves made a rough cut of the film to be like, okay, here's the story. And then we could look at it and be like, okay, what are the weak points that need strengthening? And I mean, we discussed if this was all the film was the rough cut, it was pretty good, but we really thought the idea needed to be great. And so we were like, we need more insight from talk show hosts, or we need more insight from these people at the roast besides Jeff and Gilbert, or things like that. And so since we had a rough cut, it was then it wasn't easy, but it was we were able to then boil that down into a sizzle reel. I think it was 5 or 8 minutes of here's the story. Here's the big names we have of Mark Maron or David Cross or whoever we got on our own. So that and we made our own kind of pitch deck, which again was a little easier because we already knew the story. So it was mostly just translating what we had in the rough cut onto the page. And then we took that to production companies. We were trying to find a production company partner who could help us get those names. And I had a friend who had worked on The History of Comedy, which was a CNN series. And so I was like, hey, you guys did The History of Comedy. Do you want to do this? It seems right up your alley. And one of the development people loved the project. He moved to Dan Baglio, and he went to Pulse Films, and he was like, I love this project. When I took this job, it was the first thing I pitched, even though I didn't have really permission to do it because I just loved the idea. And so with Dan and Pulse, we then kind of polished all our materials. We made the sizzle a little shorter and a little more scopy, and had their design team make a real pitch deck that looked like ours, got the information across, but I was just building it on my girlfriend's laptop using Pages or whatever Apple program. So it did the job, but it wasn't a nice, pretty deck. And so once we had that with Dan, it became a matter of, okay, who's an executive producer who could help us get the interviews, the bigger names, or the names we don't have access to now. And because Dan had worked on The History of Comedy, he knew Sean Hayes and his production company, Hayes and Mills, with Todd Milliner. And he's like, they do a lot of shows, they know a lot of people. And so I think, and because they did The History of Comedy, they'll get the tone of this. And so once we had that kind of triumvirate of We have Pulse, this production company that can deliver a film. We have Sean Hayes and Hayes and Mills, who can get talent. We have a rough cut from Julie and I that we had like a really solid base to then go pitch to people, which happened to coincide with the pandemic happening. And so it helped on a lot of fronts, because we now not only had to figure out how are we going to get these people for interviews, but how are we even going to shoot people during a pandemic? So with that kind of team, we were then able to set up pitch meetings because people know Sean and they know Dan. They were willing to hear the pitch. And so it was a matter of pitching to people, again, from a little more position of strength of like, we're not trying to start this from scratch. We have a rough cut, and here's what we have, and here's what we need. And do you want to help us? And so pitched to a lot of networks and a lot of distributors, and there's some interest from a couple places, but our meeting with Vice, there was just a difference in tone, which it wasn't a pitch of like, here's Julie and I telling you the story, like that kind of thing. They're like, no. We get the story. Like, we've seen your materials. We got it. What do you need to finish the film? Like, it was more of like a production meeting. And so it became, oh, great. We need interviews with these people. We need these many shoot days. We need this for post. We need an archivist. Like, it became a meeting about what it would take to finish the film versus here's what the film is. So Dan, like, after the meeting was, I think we've sold the project, because we didn't really have to pitch it to him. They were just acting as if the project is already there. So, and so once that happened and the deal was signed with Vice, it was then a matter of figuring out, okay, how do we shoot these interviews with these people that Sean is getting, and the Pulse team is helping us book these new interviews. How are we going to actually shoot them?
I want to do what I often do, which is interrupt the momentum of the entire interview, and with a left field question. I'm putting myself in Julie's shoes, and I'm thinking, here's this guy I met at this wedding, and he's just seems like a nice guy. I don't know what you were thinking. And now he's approaching me about whether this is a good idea, this documentary. What got you so involved, and how did you know that this was someone you wanted to work with? And obviously turnaround is fair play. Nick, you can answer the same about Julie, but I'm just curious because it's someone has a informal interest in film, gets pulled into this 4 to 5 year process is interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I've always been really interested in documentary anyway. And the friend, who kind of introduced me to Nick at the wedding is a former comedian. I knew him for several years, and just always thought he was fantastic and trusted, anybody he would introduce me to. And Nick is also in a writing group with him. So there's sort of that creative connection. Like, I knew he was someone who had something, if my other friend speaks so highly of him, obviously. And did my fair share of research too. He checked out okay. But just the idea that, it was flattering when he approached me. And I had been very much actively looking for other ways to kind of expand projects I was doing. And his idea was just so original and brilliant. And he was very clearly passionate about it. And like you said, we kind of bonded over the onion issue that I kept that thing for years, moving back and forth to New York and Vegas and LA. And it meant a lot to me. So to find somebody else who had meant something so much to was just kind of, this is a good fit. It's one of those instances of your gut is telling you yes, and this is one of the appropriate moments to listen to your gut. And I'm very glad I did.
So this is really bad, but I just want to go back to what we were talking about before.
I knew you would, because that would make the most amount of sense. We were on a trajectory. You're going to ask about virtual filmmaking or something that would be like germane. Anyway, sorry.
I was just curious, like, what names did Vice help you get that you couldn't get on your own? Like, what was that list of names that they helped secure?
It was
Well, it
more
was like
hazy. Sean and
yeah,
Hazy
like
Mills.
yeah, like Sean Hayes really helped. I mean, Pulse was good for kind of all the production stuff. They were really good at and then uh securing the talent once we had their contact info. But like Hazy Mills was really good. Like, and they had a great suggestion, which also I helped the story, which is we had focused almost entirely on kind of stand-up comics, The Onion, and they were like, well, because Sean loves theater, he's like, Broadway had to close too, and there's a lot of comedic performers on Broadway. We should talk to like Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick are the producers. I'm like, that's a great idea if you want to talk to them. And so he texts them, and now we have that on the books. And because of now including that storyline, it made sense to include like Scott Thompson's storyline, which is also a kind of theater New York off-Broadway story. And so like that was kind of like, that would be like the way it would work is they would be like, oh, you should talk to this person. And and we would kind of work our way through a list of like, okay, who are the talk show people we want to talk to? If we can't get them, can we get the head writer? Can we get one of the producers? So like for SNL, it's like we got Beth McCarthy Miller, who's the director, and we got Michael Schur, who was the head writer who did Weekend Update. So that's where it helped and it was twofold. It was because it was a Sean, people know Sean Hayes, so it helped in that regard, and also helped to say we have a home for the film. It's going to be on Vice this September, and that helped with getting people that we wouldn't get before, because even like Mark Maron, he's talked about on his show, he's done interviews for documentaries that never get released. And that is not uncommon, that these people get approached for a project, they spend their time sitting with you, and then nothing ever comes of it. And so once we had a distributor and a date and a timeline, and it'd be like, so if you want to talk to us, you got to talk to us in the next 3 months, because this is coming out in September. And so having those forces is what helped us kind of get those people who maybe might have been hesitant before to sit down.
Follow-up question. Sorry, Liz. So when you had Sean Hayes and Pulse involved, was it like, you're just going off and you're like, booking Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick and doing these interviews, or was it all kind of contingent on having Vice or someone like Vice like ready to distribute the movie before they would actually start getting the ball rolling on those other things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Julie can talk about it, but yeah, we had kind of reached the limit of what we could do by ourselves. And so we knew we needed partners to get those, to not fill the holes, but to secure the foundations of the parts of the structure that we thought needed more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we kind of topped out with we gotten Marin, Janine Garofalo, David Cross, Daryl Hammond, Lewis Black, Doug Stanhope, those kind of names. And then they filled in the gaps with Chris Kattan was the big one for SNL. And then Cedric the Entertainer for the roast, Rob Riggle, talking about being a 9/11 first responder, and then also, seeing firsthand the blowback that Janine Garofalo had later as she was speaking out against the Iraq War. It was just kind of everybody calling in their favors and just kind of, like Nick said, filling in the gaps where we needed, whether they were actual talent or the writer producers. Also like Rich Daum for the Colbert Report, and Allison Silverman as well, kind of those industry side of people that we didn't really know ourselves that well.
Yeah, or even like someone like Jimmy Carr, who we had actually spoken to years earlier at like a Comedy Central party of like, here's the idea, like, and he's like, I don't think I need to talk about this, at the time. But then when it's now we have Vice and there's a release date, Jimmy Carr will now sit and talk with us, so it just had that extra weight of like a stamp of approval on an email, where it's not just me or Julie asking, it's like this producer for Vice is asking you if you want to talk to us,
Is there a theme or a mission you have with this film? I'm just thinking about Norm Macdonald and his recent passing and the kind of humor that he's famous for and kind of controversy that he falls into as well. I'm thinking about cancel culture. I'm thinking about the importance of humor. So in that Onion article and in the purpose in your goals for this film, was there a mission to encourage free speech? I don't want to answer for you, but I just feel like there's something here that ties you to that hasn't been spoken about yet.
Yeah, I think we were definitely very adamant about, like Nick said, we didn't want to just have a 9/11 clip show, of jokes. There was definitely a story to tell and a message to get across that through combining, it's part recent American history lesson for young comedy fans who don't remember this happening and don't remember what this time was like before social media, or we had coined the phrase cancel culture, and yet it existed. People had real repercussions personally and professionally about the things they said on stage, up to and including death threats. So you can combine that with, yes, there's also comedy philosophy. This is how comedians try to process events in the world on stage. Like Dino Badala said at the time, it was like one big group therapy session, and also a social psychology element to it of, what do comedians provide to audiences that kind of help move us forward and regain a sense of normalcy, and even push society forward in a lot of ways. If you look at the Bill Hicks and Lenny Bruce's and George Carlin's and all that, they were always the ones who were starting to get us thinking in new ways about what the government is telling us and what the media might not be telling us, especially in this case. So we definitely just wanted to explore those different options of all coming together and really saying, yes, comedy is something that helps us process. It's universal, it's timeless. As they said in the film, there were Holocaust jokes, there's Kennedy assassination jokes, there's Pearl Harbor jokes. It's not something that's ever going to go away. This is just the prism through which we explored it of, this was the time when it was like everybody needed it in those days and weeks and years that followed.
So I have a question that you can't answer, but maybe you can give like a little bit of an answer to it. So when you guys sold the movie to Vice, like, was that like your payday? Like, or is there like another structure in the works where you're going to get paid out on the movie based off of what happens to it later, like as amount of views through Vice, or where Vice is able to distribute it elsewhere? Or how did that whole deal work for you guys as filmmakers?
Yeah, so essentially the bulk of our payment actually came in the form of a licensing fee, because Vice is licensing all the interviews that we already shot. So that became kind of the bulk of what we were getting paid. And then in addition to that, we are getting paid a salary or whatever you want to call it as the directors and executive producers on the project. So that became like the main ways we're getting paid currently. And then down the line, once Vice's control of the film passes, whatever their, like, I don't know if it's 3 months or 6 months, whatever their length of time is that they hold the rights to the film. Then after that, us and Pulse Films and Hazy Mills is kind of like the three production company originators will then hopefully make profits on distribution after that, whether it's on iTunes sales or if it's on a streaming platform down the road or international sales. Those kind of things will come down the line.
We also did get a little bit of a reimbursement, not the whole thing, but for the funds that we'd put in personally. So that was a little ask that we had in the contract that they were kind enough to accept.
So it sounds like all in all, it probably covered the expenses you guys paid on the making the movie.
Your
right?
used Prius, that right?
Yes. Yeah, we got our used Prius back. I mean, the funny thing is, someone was like, "Oh, well, that's great that you guys, made money." I was like, "Well, yeah. If we did the math though on like the hours worked versus the payout. We were working for slave wages, but we did. I mean, it is nice. I mean, when we started this, I mean, I told Julie, like, this could just be on our credit cards to get this done, and we would hopefully sell it and just get our credit, get that Prius money back. So the fact that we were made whole and have been compensated in some fashion, is great, because that does not happen in every case. But we were prepared to not get that. I guess that would be the thing, is it's nice, but we were prepared of like, okay, we're going to have to do a Kickstarter. We're going to have to get donations. We're going to have to do whatever it takes to get this made. And then hope that there's an audience there for this film that will be able to recoup those funds. But either way, we were going to finish it whether we did or not. And so it is nice that we have been compensated in any way. Like, I don't know, it's weird to say as like an artist, but like, yeah, you're like, even just getting some money is like great,
Well,
true.
As a freelance journalist, I will say it's not a life-changing amount by any means, but it's still like definitely the biggest payday I have ever had.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, like most filmmakers don't make any money on their films. They spend years and years and years on them. They put, hundreds of thousands of dollars or more into them, and then they never see a penny. So the fact that you guys got a return is pretty huge, and you should guys be very proud of that, Can
I give an example? So just like an example, on my first narrative feature, the most money I made on that film was that we did like I four-walled it for like awards considerations for like Film Independent and those kind of things. And the most money I got back was from renting the theater out and getting my share of the tickets. Like, that was the most money I made on that film, right. Which it was not a lot, because it was a small theater, but like, it literally, I was like, this is the best part of this, was putting it in a theater. Like, who would have guessed that would be where I would make any kind of money?
It's cleaner accounting is what you experienced. Yes. Just a yes. quick transaction. I know we're winding down, but when you sent the pitch email to us about getting on this show, you did focus a lot on virtual production and working in the pandemic. And I realized that we've barely talked about that. So if there's any way you can give some takeaways for our audience who are filmmakers on how best to put together virtual productions, it would be great for them to hear.
Yeah. I mean, the big things we kind of figured out was whatever you do, just don't make it look like a Zoom, that was kind of the network's biggest concern, and our concern was that, it's people talking to a camera. So what we would do is we would have Julie set up on an iPad or like a laptop off to the side for eye line, so that the interview subject could talk to her. And then we would have a remote crew camera set up from a safe distance or outside, or whatever the interview subject was comfortable with, if they were vaccinated or not.
And there's also a lot of guidelines that we had to follow, the rule pulses.
Yeah, and getting people tested. So we followed all those. But the big thing was, to keep the kind of camera that we were shooting with, to use as close as we could the same camera and lenses. And then I could remotely tried my best to direct the crew as to what they should be, what the framing should be, what the lighting and look should be, while Julie is handling the interviews, so that they're talking to a person, even though sometimes they're not happy that they're talking to a person on an iPad. Like, I won't say names, but there was an interview subject who's like, why I came all the way here to talk to another screen? Like, what am I doing here? That kind of thing. But
he was still a good sport about it.
He was still good, and he gave a great interview. But
it was Scott Thompson.
But Scott was great. Once he got into it and the conversation actually started, but there was the initial of like, oh God, not another Zoom. And what we found was, it seemed like, this is going to be a pain in the butt. But it actually kind of helped us in some ways, because it did give us a freedom to shoot with people that we wouldn't have had otherwise, where typically it would be like block shooting, like, okay, we're going to be in New York this week. We can only shoot people this week that are available. at this time. And because we were doing it remotely, we could be like, you just tell us when, and we'll get a 3-person crew for that day to shoot with you. And so like, we wouldn't have got Jimmy Carr because he was in London. So if we were doing a normal thing, we wouldn't have flown ourselves out and a camera crew out to shoot Jimmy Carr, but because it was remotely, we could get him, set it up and do it easily. So
At
it had
5 in the morning in LA.
Yes.
Time.
So it had its limitations, because there are some times where, say there's like there's an interview subject where they found an outdoor location, but there's a train there. And so we're like, oh God, like, how are we going to make this work? Or like, okay, we can't shoot outside here. Let's put the camera crew outside and the interview subjects inside. And so those things where if we had been on set, we would have seen that problem right away and fixed it, was challenging. But I think the benefits of being able to get whenever we wanted, whenever they were available, because we could just book the crew around them, was a flexible thing that did help ultimately.
And also financially beneficial. It saved us a lot of money on.
Yeah. Versus flying us out everywhere. We could afford to do the testing, and because that does add to your budget if you're having to test crew. So not having Julie and I on set or flying us around the country helped make up for some of those costs.
So I have one more final question before we get to our little 5 final questions. Like, Nick, you've done, scripted, narrative, and documentary. Julie, this is your first film. What's next for you guys? Are you guys going to do another documentary? Are you going to work together again? Not to put you on the spot. Like, what's the plan going forward for you guys filmmakers?
We've discussed, we've already thrown around a couple ideas, some based on people we recently worked with. Nothing. I have another book in the works that's separate from the documentary realm, a memoir with comedian Byron Bowers about his life. And some other projects, none of which can really be mentioned yet, but there's always stuff on the
Ooh, exciting. Fun.
Yeah, I think I mean, we haven't gone in depth and had a like powwow, but I think both of us feel like we want to continue to make. I mean, we have been approached by other companies to do something similar on similar topics, and so we made a good film, or the reaction has been that we made a good film, and so we think there will be opportunities to do similar things. And I think Julie and I's big thing is making sure that it fits. If it's going to be under the Too Soon brand, does it fit that story brand? And if it doesn't, then okay, does it have a different name? Do we even want to do it? Like, I'm guessing, I mean, we could do all kinds of documentaries, but I don't know if Julie is interested in doing a non-comedy documentary, so I think that will be part of it, is like Julie will work on projects. And if we have that crossover, then we'll work together to do what we can do. Because we are it's a good team. I don't know. Our working marriage survived 5 years, so.
We definitely fill in each other's gaps and expertise, areas. Like Nick has this stuff that he does, I have this stuff that I do. And I think it's been a really great partnership, but I for one, when the right ideas come along, Nick is correct in that, like, I'm not going to just do anything. It has to be a good, again, an original, unique, brilliant idea for me to want to do it. But I'm very much looking forward to working again together in some capacity.
And I think it'll be a little easier too, because this was Julie's first time around, which is, I think, we spent a lot of time having to be like, this is how you make a film, and Julie in meetings would just have to be like, maybe this is a dumb question that everyone knows the answer to, but I have no idea what you're talking about right now. Can you explain what this means? And so I think it'll be a lot, the next ones will be a lot easier because we'll have gone through the process together. And Julie is more of a veteran now of filmmaking and what the process is like. Like those kind of things.
Just for the record, I play dumb on purpose sometimes. It's a journalism trick to be like, so what do you mean by, can you explain? I'm not all that dumb all the time.
No. Yeah.
And making
I
movies
hate-
is an irrational process, so it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Fair.
it's still storytelling. I'm good at telling a story about comedy, so in those respects, I think I pulled my weight.
I hate to ask just another question, but I have to. What was your style for asking questions during interviews? Like, I mean, were you guys just tagging each other in and out and both interviewing the subject, or did you guys pick one person to do the interview depending on who it was? Like, how did you guys handle that as co-directors?
It was mostly me doing the bulk of it, because I can, research everything that needs to be researched in the comedy realm a little bit better. And with the vast majority of people, already had a relationship with them, and
Nice.
just know how to talk to comedians in general. So
Yeah.
anything that I missed at the end, Nick would kind of chime in with.
Yeah, if there was like a story beat that I was like, oh, we need more of this, or we missed this thing, or oh, we could use this connective bite, then I might be like, oh, hey, just to follow up on what Julie was asking, can you talk about that first night back, or whatever the thing is that because sometimes an interview would just go, you never know what direction an interview would go, and you ask someone, we would usually start, Julie would ask with like, okay, so just tell us about where were you on 9/11, and everyone had a story, and some of those stories would take up a lot of the interview, and some would be a little thing. So sometimes it was just, okay, we got 2 minutes left, let's get these 3 things that we need from them real quick.
Yeah, so it wasn't just rapid fire where they're getting distracted by different people. It was, there was definitely a set process to it.
Nice. Okay, I'm done, I promise.
Now, this is great because I mean, Julie and I have not done a lot of interviews together, so it's good to be able to get into the weeds and the details with you guys.
Yeah.
Well, that was another good thing about our different roles of, like, Nick was able to kind of handle all the film press, and I handled more of the comedy press and covered more ground and knew what we were talking about in different areas. But yeah, it's good to
Nice.
be. I'm gonna miss seeing them on Zoom every couple days. So it's a good final time around.
Nice.
Well, then let's segue to the final 5 questions.
Dun, dun, dun.
All right, so we need each of you to answer each question. Whoever goes first, up to you. I know Julie's answer. What is the first film you ever made, and how do you feel about it now?
The first film I've made is called Too Soon, Comedy After 9/11, currently available on Vice platforms, as well as their YouTube page. I'm extremely proud of it. It's for sure a all-time career high that I'm going to get a poster framed and stick it up there with the rest of my little journalism covers as soon as possible.
Nice.
What do I consider like the first thing I made? I mean, I started making videos in high school. I'm trying to remember what the first one was. It might have been something like how to load a Pez dispenser. And it was as if it was like a 1950s tutorial, like very like first you buy Pez, and like that kind of thing, and but then it goes a little off the rails, which and becomes like he's dancing with the Pez dispenser and gets crazy. But yeah, I started out making videos like that in school, in high school. And I find them very fun. I know my friends who were acting in them are very embarrassed by them, but I find them an interesting. It's interesting to see just like, oh yeah, like, oh, okay. I always liked comedy stuff, and I always liked things that were taking the standard and figuring out a way to make it a little weird and different.
What's the best filmmaking advice or writing advice that you've ever received?
For me, the writing advice is always the basic show, don't tell. It applies to anything, whether it's journalism, whether it's filmmaking. And what was the first one?
No, that was it, I think. Or if you have filmmaking advice, you could answer that too.
Filmmaking advice. Work with good collaborators who you trust and you share a vision. Don't jump into something that you're like, oh, I hope it'll work. Be sure up top.
Nice.
I would say for writing, a screenwriter teacher said the only rule of screenwriting is keep it interesting. Like you can fail at all the other aspects and grammar and punctuation. If people keep turning the page because they're interested in what's going to happen next, like that's the biggest rule. And then filmmaking, I wrote a article for Movie Maker magazine about Werner Herzog gave this lecture at my college, which was an amazing lecture. But one of his like main takeaways is that people are more likely to help you if you are doing something than if you're thinking about doing something. So just say, I'm making a movie. I am shooting. It's shooting now. Like it's already in process. The train's already left the station. And like, do you want to hop on this train versus can you help me build a train? Like nobody wants to help you build a train. People want to hop on a train that's already going.
I still think punctuation is important.
Of course.
What are your goals as filmmakers?
Moving forward from here, I want to stay with the path that I think I've always carved out for myself within the comedy industry, of having a reputation of someone who is not going to just build off of the soundbite out of context or listicles or hot takes. That it's real and honest and unique and telling the stories that no one else is telling, and finding a unique perspective to tell potential audiences why someone or something is unique and special.
It's kind of a philosophy I've only come to in the last year or so, or 6 months, of thinking about the film and why it worked and why I want to do what I want to do in the future. And I don't know, I like little devices. So like I'm calling it like the 3 E's, which is I like to entertain, educate, and enlighten people. And so if I can get 2 of those 3, that's good. If I can get all 3, then that's perfect, because I don't know, I feel like Too Soon is very entertaining. You do learn a lot, and then hopefully it's a little enlightening on philosophy and healing power of comedy. And so I'm just looking at the projects that I work on in the future. I just want to be, does it check those boxes? Because I want to make something that has value for an audience, not just for me. And I feel like those are the 3 things I'm looking at now.
If you could go back in time, what's one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Feel free to go first, Nick.
Don't worry about what other people are doing. Just things happen in their own time. So just focus on, don't waste time and energy worrying about what other people are working on and succeeding or failing, and just worry about your own projects, because that's just, and also maybe just time management will probably be the biggest thing, because I look back on what I wasted time on. I was like, oh, I could have written so many more scripts if I wasn't worried about this thing, which now seems so frivolous and just a time sucker drain.
I think mine would be maybe for a more specific group of people. But I definitely consider myself more of an introvert and someone who only ever wants to work alone, and I only trust like my vision of things. I think I would have tried to put myself out for collaboration in a lot of ways a lot sooner, and changed my mindset about it's got to be my way or I'm not doing this story or anything else. And that was even part of an essay that I wrote. We had gotten a $5,000 grant from Women Making a Scene. And I had kind of learned through this process, collaboration can actually bring out a lot of good attributes in you and pair you up with someone else, and you play off each other, and it helps make both of you better, is something that I definitely learned in this process. And if I could go back and try and do that sooner.
Final question. Is making movies hard?
Yes. I mean, the short answer, yes, it is. Well, I don't know. Making a good movie is hard. It's very easy to make a bad movie. And I made plenty when I was in high school and fooling around with a video camera. But it is challenging to make a good film, in my opinion.
I personally spent a lot of sleepless nights tossing and turning, and oh my gosh, if this doesn't work out, what's going to happen? And in the process of doing that, might have missed out on the fun aspects of it. Like, oh yeah, we are interviewing these people and we are making progress the whole time. And it was just like trusting yourself to see it through. I think it was maybe more mentally, emotionally difficult than in practicality, I think. Because yeah, like Nick and Werner said, you just do it. This thing is happening. So it's more, I think, getting over the mindset hurdle, in my opinion.
Nice. So where should people go to watch the movie? It's out now on Vice, but do you have like a link, a URL? Like where should people head?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to YouTube and you type in Too Soon Vice, it'll pop up on the Vice channel. And if you're listening to this in the deep future, if you just go to toosoondoc.com, there'll always be a link to wherever it is playing or wherever you can watch it.
And then just out of curiosity, do you know how long it's going to be on the Vice's YouTube before they pull it down?
I think it's through November, early November.
November
nice
is what we've seen so far. But
so when people are listening to this in the future, which is about 2 weeks from now, you will be able to watch it still, and it'll probably have 1.4 million views by then. I'm just gonna guess. So Liz, what did you think about our conversation with Nick and Julie?
The only moment I remember, and I mean, I wish I gave Nick a hard time about this in the show, but I didn't, is he made some comment about how he had to explain the filmmaking process to Julie, and it slowed the production down. And I remember just like being taken aback by that moment, because I know he didn't mean anything by it. But then Julie made a comment about how sometimes she plays dumb and that it's a journalist in her. I just remember seeing I liked seeing the cracks in their relationship because it made them more human, because they are such a well-functioning team that I enjoyed seeing. I just enjoy them in general. I enjoy seeing the flaws. So that's what I remember. But it also was such an interesting model for collaboration that I was inspired by that. And I'm thinking, who do I know that I went to school with that I met at a wedding that I can now make a movie with?
Yeah, no, it was really interesting to hear like the way they divvied up duties, which I didn't ask that question until like the very, very end of the interview, but I was just like curious. And it was interesting that Nick was all technical with the camera, and then Julie did all the interviewing and asking the questions, and then Nick would chime in. And I thought that was really cool that was the way that they broke it up. And being a 2-person crew is like, how else would you do it? I guess. But yeah, no, it was cool to like hear the little bit of their process and, just kind of how they secured a lot of their more famous talent, which was like really interesting because a lot of it came from Julie herself, and then some of it came from other relationships. But yeah, it was kind of fascinating to hear like how it all was pieced together over time. Yeah. But Liz, do you even remember what the news segment was called when we had one?
It wasn't Network, was it?
Oh, it was Network. Yeah.
I think these segments, like, we have to have an offline conversation about it, because unless we go each time and say, this is our segment where we talk about the news, and then we show a clip from Network, it is so random just to have him say, like, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And then we just talk about, like, a news piece. So maybe that's what this is right now, is that we're trying to bring in a segment where we talk about the news because our producer wants us to. And so that's what we're doing right now. Network.
Listen to me. Television is not the truth. We'll tell you anything you want to hear. We lie like hell.
Thanks to Eric Toms, our new producer. We've got a new story to talk about from YM Cinema Magazine. And it's the title of the article is, With the Rise of New iPhone Filming Technology, Will iPhones Replace DSLRs in Filmmaking? And I think, and there's a subtitle. But with regard to that, Alrik, do you think that iPhones are primed to take over?
No, I don't. And I mean, having actually shot a short film on an iPhone, I feel
right.
like, it's a cool tool. It's great and all. And I mean, it definitely looks pretty awesome. And it's far better than any phone has any right to be, but it just feels like the same thing I always say when anyone asks me this question. It's just like, well, just get a real camera. I mean, you know somebody within the town that you live in wants to make movies and has a nice camera. So find that person and make a movie with them, because that's what this is all about.
Her.
It's all
I know
about
it
collaboration.
sounded like them, but it also sounded like him. So make with
Did
them.
I say him or them?
It's like was too ambiguous that I couldn't say anything. I had to say something.
Well, for a while we were working on our pronouns and just having like her be the standard, So I think we should go back to that. So yeah, find her in your town, this person who has a fancy camera, and make a movie with them, because I think that's what this is all about. It's collaboration. It's not about you trying to do it all on your own, or you as the auteur mind like creating this thing with your phone because that's the tool you have. Like whatever, just find the best camera, find the best people, find the best collaborators, go make your movie. But what do you think, Liz? Do you think this is like we're all going to be shooting with iPhones in 5 years?
I'm not an expert, and I want to create a disclaimer to my answer, which is I'm not a shooter, I'm not an editor. I know what a codec is, and I know about various resolution specs, but I'm really not someone who is going to be impacted directly by the evolution of iPhone filmmaking, unless my DP says I'm doing iPhone or nothing else, and I walk. But I wanted to say that there was this film that was recommended to me last week by Kristen Fitzgerald. Kristen Fitzgerald recommended the film, and it's a film called The Begotten, and it's from like the late 80s or early 90s, and it's this horror film, and it's all on YouTube, and it's like the worst resolution, the grainiest footage. It's all black and white, and yet it's still incredibly impactful. And I think as long as you're telling a story, and you're telling a story that, that at least one author feels is worth telling, that they're going to invest their heart and energy into, I'm not that picky about what format is being shot on. So I'm okay if it's an iPhone, if that's all the filmmaker has. I'm happy to support filmmaking and storytelling at any level. It's interesting that you thought it was an auteur perspective. Maybe it's because the article referenced that fancy schmancy Lubeski, right? Cinematography?
Yeah.
Cinematographer?
Yeah.
But I thought of it more
I feel
as like
like, but it does
cheapness
play into
thing.
that though, because it is like you can just whip out your phone and you can go make a movie whenever you want, however you want, And they were talking about it in the article, like, oh, it's got HDR now, so you can like have this option in this tool. It's like, who fucking cares? like they all look good. Like an iPhone 10 or 8 even looks great. They all have good video. It's like, I don't know. When I was talking to Timothy about this years ago, and like the whole camera discussion of like, ooh, which camera should you shoot on? Basically, any modern day camera is gonna look amazing, and that should be like the thing that you care less about. Like when you're making a movie, it should be the story that you focus more on, and the camera doesn't even matter. Like whatever camera you have access to, whatever's going to be easiest to use for your crew or for yourself, it should be the one that you use. And iPhones are not the easiest because they don't have a lot of data storage, and the batteries run out hella fast. And so like when I made my movie, I had to like rig like a Morpheus thing or whatever they're called, Mobi. I don't remember what they're called, but like the little battery pack,
Yeah.
that goes with phones. So I had to like rig one of those to my device, figure out a wiring situation, make sure the wire didn't pop out, make sure it was powering, make sure I had enough, power on my battery that, and it's just like, if you take like a C100 or whatever, like any basic camera that you can get for like $100 online to rent for like 3 days from any of these websites, it's like they have batteries that will last for 4 hours. So just, it's like, I don't know. Anyways, and your DP, this person who lives in your town, she will have like an excellent set of batteries with their camera too. So it doesn't matter. Just, I don't know. I think do the thing that's the easiest for you, but if the easiest thing for you is an iPhone, then do it. But I don't think that it's going to be. I think there's a lot of better options than a phone to make your film. Anyways, that's my perspective.
I think it's a really good perspective. I would just say default to whoever is visually telling your story, whoever your cinematographer is. And most likely, I think we're both banking on the fact that they're not going to choose the iPhone as their medium of shooting.
Right. And if it is you and that's all you have, then give it a shot and see what happens. But think about what you're shooting before you go out and shoot it. Because I don't think a lot of people do that. They just say, oh, I'm going to make this beautiful image. And it's like, okay, but what's the story behind the image? That's the most important.
But Alrik, you've got mail.
My breath catches in my chest until I hear 3 little words. You got mail.
All right, we have a brand new listener question from Matthew Holmes, who has done really wonderful things for the show, like written an iTunes review and written into the show before and asked beautiful questions. So here he is back again with another one. Matthew writes, hey, your favorite crazy question asker here. So I've written in before, but I finally have a hard question. I started writing a horror feature and kept stalling out. I have 3 books under my belt, so this was odd not to find motivation. Then it hit me, why not pitch my book? So my question is, with all the Google it and knowing who or what's legit and not just a scammer offering representation, but really just want your money, where should I go? Who could be a helping hand, at least to point me in the right direction? Listening to Liz and her model for representation makes a ton of sense and made me think how it could be an avenue I should look down. Thank you for always bringing good information and interviews to all of us. Keep it up. So yeah, what do you think of this question, Liz?
I don't know what the question is. Is the question I'm pitching my book to make it into a movie, or am I pitching my book to sell to the publishing industry?
I think what they're trying to do is that they want representation so they can pitch their book to be optioned so that they can make a movie out of it. So I think the idea. So because rather than trying to write from scratch, just take the book they have and go option that and get representation and start a filmmaking career, which to me doesn't seem like a good idea. But anyways.
Well, okay, 2 things come to mind. One is, you go and it's the same thing you would do for film. You would find the books that are similar to yours or that are aspirational. There are their authors are where you want to be, and the books are marketed the way you want your work to be marketed, and you find out who's the core person, who's the teammate who works in sales or marketing or pitching or whatever the book publishing world calls it, that becomes that representative for that author, and you reverse engineer who you go out to with your book. But the second thing I would say is there are a lot of directors who do not have representation who are looking for content. And I do not get approached ever. I don't know if you do, Alrik, but I constantly have to make my own attachments and go after the IP that I want to work on as a director. And I would say there really needs to be more opportunities for writers to meet directors and producers. And I would say find the director you want to work with and pitch them your book directly.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Try to find collaborators outside of representation, because, I mean, if you're going after representation as a novelist because you've written 3 books, that's one thing, and I don't really know how that works. I'm sure it's similar to how it works, trying to find representation as a screenwriter, which basically, my mind is you don't find them, they find you when you are valuable to them.
Yeah.
Right? So make yourself valuable as a writer of novels by but I think by doing that is you just have to sell your book and get awards and I don't know, whatever. Get on a bestsellers list somehow. How do you do that? I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know. I just think this is a silly question. It's more if you wanted to adapt your book into a script, you should just write the script version of your book and then try to get that out into the world, not just give up on writing and then just try to use what you've already written. That seems counterintuitive.
But he said he was stalled, right? So I think if he emotionally is having a hard time, there are people you can hire just for adaptations. So that's
Yeah.
I have a feeling we don't even understand the question. I think you and what Matthew needs to respond and tell us, because I have a feeling that the actual question is like, how do I publish my fourth book? And that we're going on this like wild tangent about filmmaking, and that he's asking us about something that maybe we don't have expertise on.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if he's trying to get representation as a novelist, we both obviously don't know how to do that. We don't even know how to do it as filmmakers, because if we had, we would have done it by now. But we both don't have that. But yeah, no, I just think that, like, to me, it just sounds like he just needs to keep writing. And if he got stalled out in the horror feature he was writing, it's probably because he doesn't like the idea very much, and he has to come up with another idea that he likes more. You know, I don't know. That seems like the only thing I can think of. Or take the book you've already written and turn it into a screenplay, and then move forward with that. But I mean, I guess it's also like hard to answer this question not knowing what the ultimate goal is. Is like the ultimate goal for him to make his own movies, or is the ultimate goal to like sell them and make money and like make that a career? They're, I think, very different paths depending on what your goal is, you know.
I just wanted to suggest one final thing in that you should troll, Matthew, you should troll. If you're looking for a screenwriter to adapt your script, you should troll things like the Blood List or the Page or Screencraft or whatever, or Nichols. You should start looking at the writers that are placing in those contests. And if you're looking for a horror adaptation, find someone in the horror field of those competitions and see if you want to work together with them, because there could be a world where that writer, you could hire them to adapt your book, and then they're already getting a light shown on them for being a genre writer, and there may be a world where you could collaborate and leverage that attention for your project that you do together. So pick people who are in the same trajectory as you to work with too.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yay. So, if you want to be like Matthew Holmes, you could send us a question, comment, or suggestion to podcast@makingmoviesishard.com. If you like the show, you can leave us a review on iTunes. Please check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at MMIH Podcast, YouTube at Making Movies is Hard Podcast. We want to support the International Screenwriters Association, which is an organization designed to connect writers with filmmakers through a number of programs they offer, including publishing your logline to a network of industry professionals, consultation courses, contests, and they have a top 25 writers list featuring some of their best writers. Head to networkisa.org to sign up for free today. We want to thank Nick and Julie for coming on the show this week, and thanks to my friend Karen Oberman for setting this interview up. Thank you to editor Cameron Caves for doing the editing. Thanks to all of you for listening, and talk to all y'all next week.
God, my job is really stressful this week, so that's part of me. I'm using that as an excuse for part of my insanity. And I had to drive my sister-in-law to the airport at 6:30 this morning.
Oh,
with her little baby.
Little babies. You do seem a little low energy. I'll put it out there.
Boom, boom, boom. Okay, I'll bring it up. I'll bring it up higher. And how do I sound? Do I sound okay? Do I sound okay on your end?
Well,
okay.
Talk like you're going to talk on the show.
Hello. I can also raise my... Oh, it's peaking?
Yeah.
What about that? Is that better?
That's much better. But now I can't see you.
You can't see me? Oh, my God. Riverside, I thought you were going to be our god, like saving us from everything. Now you're all gerbled and garbled.
Oh, good.
Funny.
Good.
Oh, well. As long as it records in pristine HD as they promise, it's worth the $10 or whatever a month.